All right, we're going to look at separating story problems. Separating story problems are all about a story that involves separating. You start with a whole amount, a total, and that could be unknown. And then you're going to take things away. There's an actual action of things going away. Now, my story seems very simple and very simplistic because I'm going to talk about cookies. I'm going to talk about her eating some and she's going to be left with some. So how does this apply? I mean, why is my child's teacher sending this to me if my child is a 5th grader or a 4th grader? Because separating story problems still are the same structure, the same format, no matter the grade. So we talk about a separating story problem given to a 1st grader is very simple, but as they get older, the language gets more complex, or it's combined with another type of story problem. Here's an example off the 4th grade star. Someone has $8.17 and they're going to mail 3 packages. We know how much the first package costs, we know how much the second package costs, but we don't know how much the third package costs. And so we're going to have to separate those amounts out in order to find that missing piece. You could add those first 2 first and then separate, or you could just separate each piece individually. We have a 5th grade story problem. A lot of times our 5th grade story problems are multi-step. But inside that multi-step is a separating. We have 185 pieces of wood. He sold 25. We've got to do that first step of separating 25 off. We have to come back with an answer, and then we know he's going to put 40 pieces into each pile of wood. How many piles is going to end up making? So it involves some division, but it first has to have that separating piece. That separating story is occurring inside that multi-step. And then we have a 3rd grade story problem where they have 85 CDs. They put 27 in this stack. They put 39 in this stack. How many are going to be in the stack that's left? And so again, we see them separating, but they're separating multiple times. So even though a separating story problem seems pretty simple, if you have an older student, it is difficult because a lot of times in the multi-step we find they only do 1 step. What is a separating story problem? It looks like this. Trinity made 6 cookies. She ate 4 cookies after lunch. Now there's 2 cookies left. Remember, we think of beginning, middle, end, but in math we think of, for joining and separating, start, change, result. With a separating story, we are starting with the total amount. How many in all? So we start with that 6. We eat 4, 2. Now, what happens when there's an unknown? Let's go with result unknown. Easiest one. Why is it the easiest? Because the story problem that is occurring is the exact same that's going to help me solve for the unknown. This is called result unknown. Trinity made some cookies for dessert. She ate 4 cookies after lunch. We know the start, we know the change, but how many cookies are left? Our result is unknown. Blank cookies are left now. So our equation is 6 minus 4 equals unknown. That's the same equation we would solve. Notice I put it into a strip diagram. Strip diagrams are fabulous when we put labels and we know how to use them because they help us set up the equations. 6 is the total. Anytime we're doing a separating story, our start is the total amount. The change is the first part, and then the second part is the result. Notice how I've color-coded them to start, change, result, so it's easy for you to see. I know this is new if you're a parent. This is how we draw strip diagrams, but a separating would always start with a total. So this is easy because my situation equation, the equation happening in the story, is the exact same one I solved with. What if the change is unknown? Trinity made 6 cookies for dessert. She ate a few cookies after lunch. I don't know how many. Now there are 2 cookies left. How many cookies did Trinity eat? Well, I know my start. I don't know my change, but I know the result. So the equation that is occurring in this story is 6 minus unknown equals result. For the little kids, we usually have them do a think sentence. Trinity ate blank cookies. We want to make sure they know that unknown. With our upper grades, it's not as important unless they're doing multi-step. When they're doing multi-step, sometimes we go ahead and like them to write that so they start getting in their head, what am I solving for? Well, this is what's happening, but is that going to give me the answer? No. I need what's called a solving equation. How am I going to find the unknown? Because 6 minus 2 equals the unknown. Our children need to be able to identify both of these equations. The equation with the unknown sitting in it, and then the equation that would help them solve for the unknown. We call this first equation, 6 minus unknown equals 2. the situation equation or the story equation. It is what is occurring. Then what do we call that other equation? It's the solving equation. It's what solves for the unknown. What about the start unknown? It is the hardest kind of separating story problem. Number one, our kids don't always notice the start was given. Because the harder it gets, the older your child gets, the more complex the language, and they kind of try to hide it from the kids. So look here, Trinity made cookies for dessert. Notice I didn't use the word some. If I said Trinity made some cookies for dessert, it's a lot easier to see that's the start and it's missing. But just by saying Trinity made cookies for dessert makes it a little more ambiguous, a little harder to find. She ate 4 cookies after lunch. Now she has 2 cookies left. How many cookies did Trinity make? What's the unknown? It's how many she made. It's the start. Trinity made blank cookies. So something minus 4 equals 2. That is the situation equation. I need to be able to write that equation. What's happening in this story problem? Now, how am I going to figure out that unknown? How am I going to figure out how many cookies she started with? Well, if I drew it in a strip diagram and I put my labels, it's really easy to see. 4 and 2 more is going to give me the total. It's going to give me how many I started with. So even though it's a separating story, I'm adding to get the answer. This is what makes problem solving confusing. It's a separating story. It's not about adding. It's about separating things, but in order to find that unknown start, then we have to add. So, how do I look at joining story structures versus separating? I just wanted to kind of go back through those because that is where the confusion can happen. Joining story problems always join things together. We have a start, it's always a part. We change with the other part and we always end up with a result. So part equals whole. It always starts with a part because we're putting things together. But if the change is unknown, we would have to subtract. If the start is unknown, we would have to subtract. So even though it's a joining story problem, you can see there's 2 places where we would have to subtract in order to find that unknown piece. On a separating story problem, we always start with the whole. So here I started with the whole, 6 cookies. She ate 4. How many are left? I don't know. Now, what if the change is missing? Should we start with 6 cookies? She ate some. I don't know. 2 are left. How am I going to solve that? Still going to subtract. But what if the start's missing on that separating story problem? She started with some cookies. She ate 4. Now there's 2. How am I going to figure out how many she started with? I would have to add. So you can again see why it's very challenging for our kids sometimes to figure out these joining and separating stories. Because even though it's a separating, I may add to get the answer. Even though it's a joining, I may subtract to get the answer. I hope this helps you better understand joining story problems and separating stories problems. Tune in next time where we're going to learn about compare. Compare is a really challenging story structure. So try joining in again for that one, and if you have any questions, ask your child's teacher or feel free to email me, TaffanyIrwin@nisd.net.